This is Green Mountain Mornings. I'm your host, Olga Peters, and my guest is Chris Mays from The Reformer. Hey, Chris.
Hello.
So tell me, what's happening on, I'm starting to call it the Hermitage Beat.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't be wrong. Let's see. We had some exciting news come out on Friday. We had received a letter. It was an email Jim Barnes, the founder of Hermitage Club, sent to members saying, we got this funding potential from Oz Real Estate, this New York-based group that's under a hedge fund type of umbrella. And he says this is a potential funding source, and we're going to look at a transaction. We've created this interim committee made of club members who are going to see whether it makes sense, and we could be open this fall or the winter.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, I think they're still hesitant to say we're going to open the golf course because it's still a little bit out there.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of the winter, I think they'd like to open for winter.
Now, would this apply to all of their properties or just at the kind of the Haystack ski area? What I remember is the Haystack ski area.
It's hard to tell. That's actually one of the questions I've submitted to Jim Barnes, the founder, because we're trying to get some more answers to some of the things, and he said that he would be willing to submit kind of a Q&A thing because they also named a new president.
Oh, okay.
This guy Harper Sibley, who's had experience at private clubs and sort of real estate development. Similar to the Hermitage.
Mm-hmm.
And so he said that they'll sit down and answer the questions together. I think it's fair to say that right now it would have to do with the foreclosed properties, the golf course, the private ski resort at Haystack Mountain, maybe the four inns that were part of it, and the townhouse village that was part of this whole big foreclosure.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure if some of the other outlying inns and real estate projects would be included in this. That's one of the questions that I'm trying to get answered this week.
Mm-hmm. Now, the last time we talked, there had been a few court proceedings.
Mm-hmm.
Have they finished? Are they ongoing?
There's been a few. The judge has put out a few orders in favor of the plaintiffs.
Mm-hmm.
So the Hermitage and Jim Barnes, they're basically ordered to pay these amounts that have been brought up in court proceedings.
Mm-hmm.
And it's mostly over real estate and hotels and lease agreements, mortgages. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What beyond waiting for these questions back from Jim Barnes and the new president, anything else related to the Hermitage that's kind of on your radar right now?
Yeah, I'm actually right now looking at the history and what happened, what went wrong, what some of the challenges have been. So those are some of the questions that I've been asking Jim, and I'm going to be talking with other people about. I know, for one, the permitting was a big thing for them. For a long time, that was all I was covering. Their frustration with not getting their permit and not being able to move forward as planned, and how that might have been affecting the timeline, and how that could have been affecting some of their funding sources. And so, that's been widely reported, I think. But hearing about what some of the other challenges might have been and some of the things that we're not so sure about will be interesting.
Okay. Anything else happening in Wilmington? Because I think I saw something in the Reformer about the brewery has been bought at auction?
Yeah. I'm glad you remembered that. I almost forgot, but we've received a few emails. People are really supportive of this project. They think it's going to be great. So there's the guy who won the bid. He bid $160,000 on the old Maple Leaf Tavern.
Mm-hmm.
At one point, it was a brewery. For the last 10 years or so, it's been just a tavern and
Okay.
bar. It went to auction and foreclosure, and the place was pretty packed with people. I think there were 6 registered bidders,
Mm.
and so it went back
Wow.
and forth a few times. They opened it at 300,000, no one bid. Then they went to 200,000, no one bid. And then the auctioneer said, "Okay, let's get serious." He started at 100,000, and then the auction really got to a start.
Mm-hmm.
And so the guy who won is an is his parents own Shearer Hill Farm Bed and
Oh,
Breakfast in Wilmington.
okay, yeah.
And so they've been operating that, I think, for I think it's like 30 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And the one guy, he's going to come back from Jackson Hole, where he's an avalanche patroller.
Oh my gosh.
And he used to be a cook at the inn at Sawmill Farm.
Okay.
So I've talked with people who have worked there, and they said, "Oh yeah, I worked with him back in the day." And then one guy emailed me and said, "This guy's a great chef, and I'm really excited." He sent us photos of the guy eating or doing something, and so the guy who bid though is his cousin, and he lives in Long Island,
Hmm.
and I think he's physician's assistant or something like
Okay.
that. But he wants to come and run the place with get the place running with his cousin. Maybe do some private events upstairs.
Mm-hmm.
But their focus is they really want to make it a place for locals
Okay.
and cater to locals. I mean, they'll be happy to get the business of the second homeowners and
Mm-hmm.
tourists, and they do plan to have some outdoor open air dining. They said we'd like to really get take advantage of the Vermont air and kind of market that aspect of it too.
I'm trying to remember the footprint of that building. Where would you be outside there?
I
Besides
guess
the sidewalk.
yeah, I guess they would open up the front a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
The big windows area.
yeah.
Gotcha.
So I don't know if he was just kicking up ideas just because he was excited.
Mm-hmm.
But the one problem there is a leaky roof.
Right.
So there's an apartment up at the top that's leaking. So that's the big project ahead of them right now.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have some minor renovations, and they want to have the private dining options on the second floor
Okay.
where there's there's outdoor dining they can have.
Mm-hmm. Looking forward to seeing how that develops. I remember when it was more of a general store, so
Oh, really?
yeah.
Yeah, it's sad to say. I've been out to restaurants in Wilmington, since I was a kid, but I don't think I ever went to Maple Leaf.
I didn't either.
I I don't know. I might have, but I can't remember. It was probably when I was really young.
Well, Chris, thank you. We have to go hand the listeners over to Natalie Knowles, but we shall return. We are back, and this is Green Mountain Mornings on 100.3 FM, AM 1490. I am your host, Olga Peters, 41 minutes past the top of the hour, and Chris Mays from The Reformer is here in the studio with me. Welcome, Chris.
Thanks.
So we've been talking a little bit about the Deerfield Valley. I want to stay there for just a moment longer because Dover was considering a marijuana ordinance. Has that moved forward at all?
Yeah, they're wrapping it up right now. I talked with the chief last week, police chief Randy Johnson, and he's been writing the ordinance with one of the select board members, and they're modeling it after an ordinance adopted in Norwich. And this ordinance is going to allow them to fine people who are smoking in public.
Okay.
So the chief says there's a way that local police can collect most of the money with a fine if they have an ordinance like this in place. The state law does say that smoking in public is prohibited, so I think that's one thing that they're kind of looking forward to with this ordinance. I know that the ordinance is it's gonna prohibit dispensaries, medical and recreational.
Oh, okay. Both medical and recreational.
Yeah, and
Okay.
I know at least one select board member is not supportive of banning medical dispensaries. So we'll see how the vote goes. The public can petition and say, "Hey, we don't want this to go into effect," and that could trigger a special town meeting type of vote.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll see the ordinance unveiled next week?
Tuesday, yeah.
Tuesday. Okay.
It was unveiled a couple 3 weeks ago or so.
Right.
But they were just getting it all finalized and
Okay.
getting it into getting it onto the website, the minutes.
We shall see.
Yeah.
Now, coming over to this side of the mountain,
Yeah.
you covered a record store sale. It
Yeah.
happened over beers.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, Byron, the old owner, I've done a few stories on his store and
Which is, by the way.
it's In the Moment Records.
Mm-hmm.
And he opened it 13 years ago, and that was the time when records weren't so hot. Now there's been this resurgence of vinyl, and people are really into it now, and he's been riding that wave of success, and he's really excited about this new interest and new people getting involved in the industry all the time. And so I've been following that, on a year-to-year basis. I'll check in with him, and we talk about different events he's doing, and then his wife got the opportunity she got this job offer in Philly. And so I've been checking in with him. I hadn't done any stories on it yet, but he was trying to find a buyer so to continue In the Moment. As is, or with minimal changes, and so he had been trying to find a buyer, and all these people were coming forward, and he had some people who wanted to give him a deposit, and he got really close to selling it, but it just never worked out. Then all of a sudden he got an email from this guy, Sujay Patel, and he's from the Parsippany area of New Jersey. And he said, "Yeah, why don't you come up and we'll talk?" And I don't know, a day or two or three later, and he was there, and they ended up getting beers together, and there was a mess up in the order, so they had a few more beers than they expected. And so Sujay said, "Oh yeah, I was pretty lit. I think I just bought a record store." And he was in advertising and marketing in the healthcare field, pharmaceuticals. And he wanted to get away from that and live in a more rural area where he could let his kids go outside and not worry so much about what they were up to, and let them live a childhood of freedom and exploration. And he was really excited about getting into this business. He grew up listening and loving records. When he was courting his wife, though, he said he kind of started to take a break from it because he didn't want to impose this lifestyle of searching through record stores. So he paused it a little bit, and now he's back to it. And so last week I interviewed both of them in the basement of the store where they were getting a bunch of records together, and they were gonna have this big transition day, they were calling it, and where people could meet the new owner, and they were gonna put out all these new arrivals. And so it was exciting, and Byron said it was bittersweet for him, and it was bittersweet for me too. I liked shopping there, and I liked interviewing Byron and talking about the business. And he said, "There's one day I'm going to come in next week, and then I'm going to leave, and I'm not going to be here for a long time after that." And he was kind of grappling with that feeling,
Yeah.
And yeah.
So do they have a date for the transition day?
That was Saturday.
Oh, it was Saturday. Did you
Yeah.
get to go?
No,
Oh,
I was playing with my band in Dover.
okay, that's important too.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I wish the Patel, the new owner, all the luck in the world. I hope he really enjoys his new life.
Yeah, his family is living in Jamaica.
Mm-hmm.
That's where they had a second home. They were really into snowboarding, and they spent a lot of time coming up here during the year over the years. So it was kind of a natural thing for them to move here.
Mm-hmm. Looking forward to it. Now, we have a few minutes left. We have a primary coming up in what, 2 weeks?
Yep,
And you've been doing some senator profiles.
yep.
How's that going? What do you think are some of the key differences between the three candidates?
Well, Jeanette White and Becca Ballant, the incumbents, they were really talking about, how the challenges of the last session,
Mm-hmm.
the special session, and the governor vetoing bills, and some of those challenges. Becca talked about being Senate Majority Leader,
Mm.
and how she's been trying to improve communication not only in her caucus, but with between her group and the House, and between her group and the minority leader. And she talked a lot about that, about improving connections all around. And she said Vermont has kind of been immune to some of the partisan battles you're seeing nationally,
Mm-hmm.
which was nice to hear.
It's kind of a relief to hear.
And even though things got really polarized with the gun debate,
Mm-hmm.
I think she saw it as like a really healthy thing, because it was what the voters wanted to see. They wanted to see where the legislature landed on those things.
Yeah.
And Jeanette talked about things that she was gonna hopefully bring up, things that had been explored but didn't turn into law, didn't turn into a bill for a vote. And one of those things was organizing the funding of law enforcement.
Right.
Yeah,
She
and
has talked about that, how she feels the system really needs kind of an overhaul.
yeah, and she brought up how there's communities out there who don't have the same access to policing because they can't afford it, or
Mm-hmm.
other places have their own police department and other places don't, and it takes a long time for the state police to get to some of these other places.
Mm-hmm.
So that was interesting. That's something I kind of want to hear about more once the next session starts. And then there's Wayne Estee.
Yes.
He's an artist, lives in Brattleboro. He moved here about 4 years ago. He's a town zoning administrator in Dover.
Mm-hmm.
And, he was he brought up some concerns about the Clean Water Act,
Hmm.
and how some of the smaller communities might be hurt by it, and
Okay.
because of the new requirements around culverts. And he specifically mentioned Guilford and Halifax.
Mm-hmm.
And the state will reimburse them for 80% of the cost, but they'd still be responsible for 20% of the cost, which could be a way bigger number than they've budgeted for.
Especially someplace like Halifax, which has so many miles of road. It's a very big town, even though it's got a small population.
Yeah. And he also, like Jeanette and Becca, he is for a taxed and regulated system for marijuana.
Mm-hmm.
He says, our neighboring states are benefiting with the revenue. Why shouldn't we? It's a
Mm-hmm.
big economic development issue. And he also spoke about how child care and high quality internet access, high speed internet access rather, is really important to economic development, and bringing families here and keeping families here.
Yeah. Have you voted early ballot yet? I still
N-
have to.
no, I tend to vote. I tend to vote on the day of the
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
I'm usually so busy on the day of, so I try to get an early ballot in.
Yeah, I will though. I tend to vote.
It's kind of sad if journalists don't.
Yeah, I've heard the argument though for not voting as a journalist too.
I have heard that too. I figure since it's done in the privacy of a voting booth, no one needs to know what your actual choice was.
Yeah.
Well, Chris Mays from The Reformer, thank you so much for coming in. Unfortunately, we are out of time.
Thanks for having me.
You are so welcome. And I want to give a huge thank you to BCTV, who is here today filming this segment of Green Mountain Mornings. It will be rebroadcast later today as Green Mountain Mornings Tonight, and that is sponsored by Brattleboro Savings and Loan. Thanks, Chris, for coming in.
Yep. Thanks for having me.